What have they got to lose? They're trying to get citizenship. They're trying to get benefits. They're trying to get something else. They're trying to stay out of prison, whatever it is. They would go along with that mindset. Now, that's a minority of people in the military right now, but you never know what could happen in the future. On the police side of the house, I've talked to police officers from California to Tennessee, and the mindset basically is the officers that are about 35 years old and older are seeing all of this happen and understanding what's going on and getting on board and learning more and educating themselves and talking to other people and getting more concerned, where those below 35, especially those in their 20s, they're not quite there yet. They're the babes in the woods. They're still going along with the yes or 3 bags full, and they're still in what we call the Wyatt Earp syndrome. You know, I got a badge and a gun, I'll enforce the law and obey orders, and that sort of thing. And their scope hasn't focused out yet to see what's really going on in the world. So I kind of take those guys with a grain of salt because they haven't matured yet into the politics outside of their own police department or outside of their own city or county. Another problem that I've seen going on, though, that's worried me, and we've talked about this one before, is cross-deputization. Now, cross-deputization is when you have a state and a county and a city and a federal government and a tribal police all become deputized in their various organizations to where they can enforce any law they want any place they go, and it's the same as the guy that has jurisdiction there. In other words, it's a multi-jurisdictional situation. And it's going to end up at the point where we're going to have a federal police force, a uniformed federal police force, even though it may say the California Highway Patrol or the Houston Police Department or something like that on the guy's shoulder. He'll have another patch or he'll have another ID card that will show him that he can be a federal marshal or a...
well, that's already happening. I mean, that's already going on, and it's federalized radios. They put in these local regional command centers with the National Guard right next door and everything fused in together.
Well, and they're pulling it all together under the guise of Homeland Security because they couldn't make it work under FEMA like they wanted to. FEMA was a disaster. So now they're pulling it together under Homeland Security. And, you know, it just makes me ill to think that you've got the same people doing the same thing that would represent my police department and TSA. As far as I'm concerned, TSA is a total disaster. I call them the airport Nazis. It's another situation of overreaction to something by the federal government, but in the end they create a bureaucracy with police powers that is totally terrifying. You lose when you walk into an airport today, for instance. You lose the First Amendment, you lose the Second Amendment, you lose the Fifth Amendment, you lose everything. When you walk into that airport, you can't say anything, you can't have a bad look on your face or you'll get profiled, you can't complain about anything.
Now they're putting brain scanners not just in the airports but on the streets. And they make you walk through systems that scan your naked body. Those are now going on the streets, not just airports.
Well, and on top of that, you know, we're going the same direction as they did in England and the UK. And I just read this morning, as a matter of fact, about the crime rate in the UK, especially in London, has skyrocketed since the British public has basically become disarmed. But their excuse was, well, we think we've got some good video imagery of the murderers. There's 3 of them. We think we've got some good video imagery of them. Well, whoop-de-doo. That doesn't put him in jail, and it didn't save the guy's life that's lying there bleeding in the street. But the cameras in England are supposed to solve everything. So what are we doing? We're following this down the same direction. We're putting cameras all over the place. Now, I had a phone call the other day from somebody that said, hey, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, we've got cameras on the intersections of every major street now. Who owns those cameras? What are they looking at? And so I said, well, you know, I never even thought about it, but I'll check in it because I don't live in Tulsa anymore. I moved out of there and moved to the country when I thought it was a good time to do so. But I started making some phone calls, and I called the police department, and they didn't. No, they're not our cameras. They belong to the Department of Transportation or the city or somebody. So I called the city street department. No, they're not ours. I called all around. Finally, everybody that seemed to know said, well, we think they're Department of Transportation cameras. And I went, well, what are they doing on our traffic lights? And what are they looking for? What are they looking at? What are they for? Well, no one could answer that question. So I guess if you go up to the state capitol and find whoever's responsible, you can get an answer. But we're seeing this all over the country right now. Well, what does it do? It makes citizens paranoid. I've heard people say, well, you know, when it comes down to it, I'll just take my shotgun out there and start shooting those cameras off the tops of the poles. Well, when people start thinking about that, you know we've got some problems. And these are the average people. These aren't people that belong to a militia. These aren't people who would normally go out and break the law. They're just average people who have had enough. They're fed up. And they're tired of big brotherism, and Americans really hate people prying in our private business. But it's getting worse all the time, and I think it's a spring that sooner or later is going to be compressed to the point to where it flashes back, and it's going to be a big surprise. That's when there'll be federal government entities step in and say, we have public unrest, we've got to stop civil disturbances here, these people can't get away with this, we're the boss, they aren't, totally backwards on that. And that's when we're going to start seeing military-type reaction to it in the form of martial law.
Well, again, the elite running the planet are criminal. They are out of control. And they're using the police state to try to guard themselves from prosecution from their past crimes, and they want to use a police state apparatus to further consolidate their control. And we better get control of our local governments now. We better educate our mayors and people now, because a few years ago they wouldn't listen. Now they are listening. I talk about the Austin police chief, I thought he was putting me on behind the scenes and on air, saying he's a fan of the show and believes a lot of it. But then I found out people that know him separately at parties and behind the scenes at TV stations and radio stations. He's doing Alex Jones imitations and talking about me constantly. So I guess he's waking up. And if I was a police chief and I knew about this stuff, I would be thinking about it all the time. And I see that all over the country with police. As much as I bash them for violating the Constitution, I think at the end of the day they realize that it is this country they owe allegiance to, and the bad guys are in control of the government, just like Hitler was in control of Germany.
Well, Alex, I'm an old X-Files junkie. I really like that show. But every once in a while they come up with a real jewel, and one of the things that they said in there was trust no one. I don't know if you ever watched it or remember. It says, trust no one.
No, I remember.
One of the deals. Well, when it comes to chiefs of police, that is the theme. Don't trust a single chief of police out there until you get to know him personally, like you did with this guy.
I'm not even saying he's perfect. I didn't trust him till I heard behind-the-scenes stuff. The point is that they're waking up, they're paying attention.
Well, yeah, that one way or the other. They're getting on board one way or the other, slowly but surely. But you've got to understand, and I'm talking when I say you, I mean I'm talking.
They may be getting on board because they've been told to be friendly.
Well, I've told you, here's the way it works. There are chiefs of police organizations out there. There's the Major Chiefs Association, there's the National Chiefs Association, there's several others that they belong to, and they're like clubs, and they all share stuff, and they all come under different federal grant monies, and so on and so forth. And what they do is they get together, and most police chiefs of any major city is going to be a political appointee. He's going to be under serve at the discretion.
No, I agree. You've got to watch police chiefs a lot more than the average cop, because that's who's going to be infiltrated.
And most of your police chiefs organizations are very left-wing. They're very liberal. They're very socialist. And you have to be very careful. They're anti-Second Amendment. They're anti-First Amendment. I mean, there's so many things that a lot of these chiefs fall in that they wouldn't get picked for that position if they weren't that way. If you get a good conservative right-wing police chief, he's the odd man out. You don't see that very much. Now, you'll see that in the sheriffs because they're elected by the people. There's a lot of good right-wing sheriffs out there. There's a lot of good American patriotic home.
And by right-wing, you mean paleo-conservative.
Yeah, I'm talking true conservative American.
Yeah, we're going to skip this break for the InfoWars stream listeners and PrisonPlanet.tv folks. For everybody else, we'll be back in 4 minutes, and we again appreciate everybody tuning in, all the sponsors and support. We'll continue with Colonel Craig Roberts. Got about 10 minutes left with him today. It's always great having him. We got to have him back sooner to continue talking about all this as it unfolds.